Alright, welcome to my video on how to do faux marble epoxy countertops. I'm going to be going through what materials you need, each step in the process, and then just any little tips or tricks that I learned along the way and that hopefully helps you not make the same mistakes that I did. But yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so here's the supplies that we'll be using today. You want some paintbrushes. This will be to level out your epoxy. I did the 1/8 notch. This you can use to mix your epoxy. You don't need it. You can just use paint sticks, but I had one of these, so. And then of course your epoxy. I got that on Amazon. The rustoleum will be used to make the accents. I got a few different colors. I got these to put the epoxy in and then to dump into this bucket to mix. And then these will be for the spray paint, painter's tape to block everything off. I've got this plastic sheeting to be able to drape over the cabinets. And then sandpaper to sand everything first so that the primer adheres well. So this is the primer I got. And then this is the white paint that I'll be painting for the base coat. And then gloves if you need them, and mask for the sanding and everything. And then a heat gun, which will be used to kind of get rid of all the bubbles once the epoxy's on there and make it nice and smooth. The first thing you want to do is prep your work area with some plastic sheeting, taping it right under the edge of the countertops to just protect your cabinets and your floors and everything else from when you pour the epoxy. So first I'm going to put the tape right underneath of the countertop, just so I know that there's a good seam there, and then I will tape this to this tape. I feel like prepping is my least favorite part, but it's definitely the most important. So looking back on it now, I would still use the painter's tape for that first piece of tape that I used right underneath the cabinet, but then I think I would use duct tape or something stronger to tape to that tape, to tape the plastic to that tape, because once I poured the epoxy, some of it was kind of running off and the weight of it was pulling that tape down. So I would just use something a little stronger, but still use the painter's tape right against the cabinet so that that paint doesn't peel off when you take that tape off. So for the upper edges of the cabinet, I used white tape just in case some of it got stuck under the epoxy. I didn't want you to be able to see the blue. If you use white, you won't be able to see it against your white countertop. Okay, everything is prepped. The sink was a little tricky because I didn't have my dishwashers right there. I didn't have anything to really tape to, so hopefully that works out okay. We did a dry fit to make sure the new one actually fit in there before we did all this work, and then found out that it didn't. So make sure you do that, because Dom did have to cut some of these corners because they were rounded and the new sink is more square. Next, you'll just use a medium grit sandpaper to get off that top glossy layer of the laminate so that the primer will adhere better to the surface. Okay, once you sand, you're going to take some alcohol and put it on the cloth and then wipe up all the dust. So one thing I did try to do was on the edges to just round these out a little bit. I might not have done it enough, but you want to round out this edge and then this bottom edge, because when you put the epoxy on, you want it to be able to flow off, and if this edge here is too sharp or this edge is too sharp, it won't flow properly here, and that epoxy will sometimes pool up right here instead of falling right off. So you want a little bit of a rounded edge underneath. So I did that all the way around. Okay, now it's time for primer. No going back now. So I'm just gonna do the edges here with the brush and then dump some on here and just roll it out with the roller. I put some tape around here to kind of get any lint off or anything too, so. Okay, off to a good start. It's all primed. I'm gonna give this about an hour before I put the real paint on, but you can still see how thin I put it on. You can still see the pattern underneath, so it doesn't need to be crazy. Okay, it's been an hour. Now I'm gonna go through with my actual paint. I just bought Delicate White from Home Depot, the PPG. I'll probably do 2 coats of this and see how that goes. Sprayed my spray paint into these two. I've got gray and gold, so I'll set those aside. Now mix the epoxy. Let's do it to 24 ounces. Let's see how that goes. I'm gonna put them in separate things and then mix them in this bucket. So now I'm starting with my first color, the bronze color. Ideally you want to start with your lightest color first and then layer your darker, more accent colors on top of that. I didn't have a lighter color than this. This was kind of my base color, so that's what I started with. I started by drizzling it with the paint stick, and then I'm going to go back through with a brush to soften it up and make any other designs I want to. I highly recommend finding pictures of marble designs that you like so you can kind of plan out where your veins will be, and also make sure they're all flowing in the same direction, because that's how natural stone kind of works. Now I'm just going back through with my brush and kind of blotting it to soften everything up. With these darker colors, a little bit goes a long way, so I feel like I kind of went too dark at first. I probably would have gone lighter than this, but once it's on there, it's kind of too late. You can really just blend it out, but I decided that's just what was going to happen for mine. I started kind of just brushing it like this, which really lightened it up, and then since it was very dark lines, I kind of started adding lighter pieces in between the major veins to soften the whole picture up a little bit. I also recommend taking a step back every so often to kind of take in the whole picture and make sure your design is coming along like you want it to. After I was happy with how the gray base color turned out, I went through with the metallic gold and added my accents and blended that out as well. Okay, now all the colors are on. Gotta go over with the heat gun. Okay. If you're kind of panicking how it's looking, just try and relax and use the heat gun to really help blend those colors. About 3 to 4 hours in, make sure you go through and catch any of the drips that are hardening on the edge. Alright, here's the final look. After waiting the 24 hours, I went through with some 80 grit sandpaper and just sanded the whole thing so that the next layer adheres to the epoxy. I then went through with some alcohol and wiped all of the dust off of the sanded counters. I did the heat gun 3 times. Once all my epoxy was set, I went over it with the heat gun to pop all the bubbles, and then I waited about 5 minutes, did the heat gun again, waited another 5 minutes, did the heat gun again, just to really make sure all the bubbles are out, everything's flowing nicely over the edges. You know, every so often you want to go around the edges and just either with your finger, a gloved finger, or with like a paint stick, get those drips that come off the edge. Okay, second coat is on and the sink is in. Look at this beauty. Oh, as you can see, I've already put it to good use. So much more room. Counters turned out okay. There's a few little, you can see some bumps here. I'm assuming that's from like dust getting in it overnight, but you know, there's only so much you can do. I ended up getting this little heater. I got the heater to keep the room between around 75 degrees. You want your room to be between 70 and 80 degrees. But I really wanted to make sure I was right around 75 degrees so that the epoxy cures properly. So with that extra airflow from the heater, that's probably where I got some of this dust, but I'd much rather the room be at the right temperature for this to harden up and not be tacky or prone to more scratches and things like that. So it's a trade-off. I waited about 24 hours before I put the sink in to let this harden up, and then I'm gonna wait probably about 5-ish days before I put any of the appliances back on the counter, because I want it to be fully cured before I put anything on the counter. But yeah, I really like how it turned out. The more I look at it, the more I like it, and the more everything comes together, it just looks better. One thing I didn't do, and it made it kind of difficult over here, was I didn't take my tape off. You can kind of still see some. I gotta pick some of this off a little more and touch things up. But you want to take your tape off and all the plastic off while the epoxy is still it's not fully cured. So I waited till the next morning, so everything was like rock hard, and it was really hard to get some of that tape off. I kind of had to use a razor blade to cut along the tape and then peel it off. But ideally, you probably want to wait like 3-ish, 4-ish hours and then cut through the resin to get all the tape and the plastic off your cabinets, because it'll be a little softer that way and much easier to peel off. I did not wear a black shirt this time. I think I wore a white shirt just in case, and it wasn't baggy. It was tight to my stomach so that as I'm leaning over, I wasn't getting my black fuzz from my shirt all up in the epoxy. That was a huge mistake I made the first time, and you know, it's not noticeable unless you're like looking at it with a microscope, and I know it's there, but it's just the little things that are gonna make it just look better. Once you do have that first layer on, you've got about 45 minutes to be able to put your spray paint on and kind of work with it. So don't freak out, take your time, but not too much time. And then remember, use the heat gun to get the bubbles out. You want a 1/8 of an inch notches in your spreader, so that you don't want to go any thicker than that with the epoxy, or else it won't cure properly and the bubbles won't be able to get through the top to pop, and you'll get little bubbles in your epoxy, so you don't want that. Ideally, you don't want your any kind of fans or your air ventilation on, because that's just more dust that's going to be in the room that will get into your epoxy and settle on there, and yeah, you won't be able to get that out. I got a little leakage of the epoxy. This is the only spot. I'm just going to sand it off because it won't even chip off. I'm going to sand it and then just repaint it, but really make sure your seams of your tape and your plastic are on there really good, because that epoxy will just flow through everything. If you do happen to drip any epoxy on your floor, at least with my floors, I just put a little bit of the alcohol on a paper towel and just wiped it off before it really hardens. I feel like if it hardens, you could probably just chip it off or use like a razor blade or something. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or anything like that, just comment down below, and we'll see you next time.